This is the multiple choice questions in process-to-process delivery, UDP, TCP, and SCTP from the book Data Communications and Networking by Behrouz A. Forouzan. 1. Urgent data requires the urgent pointer field as well as the URG bit in the blank field. A. Control. B. Offset. C. Sequence number. D. None of these. Answer, A. Control. 2. To accomplish flow control, TCP uses a blank window protocol. A. Limited size. B. Sliding. C. Fixed size. D. None of these. Answer, B. Sliding. 3. UDP and TCP are both blank layer protocols. A. Data link. B. Network. C. Transport. D. None of these. Answer, C. Transport. 4. In TCP, one end can stop sending data while still receiving data. This is called a blank. A. Half close. B. Half open. C. One-way termination. D. None of these. Answer, A. Half close. 5. In SCTP, the acknowledgment number and window size are part of each blank. A. Data chunk. B. Control chunk. C. A or B. D. None of these. Answer, B. Control chunk. 6. A connection in SCTP is called in blank. A. Negotiation. B. Association. C. Transmission. D. None of these. Answer, B. Association. 7. An ACK segment, if carrying no data, consumes blank sequence number, S. A. No. B. 1. C. 2. D. None of these. Answer, A. No. 8. The association identifier in SCTP is blank. A. A unique verification tag. B. A combination of logical and port addresses. C. Either A or B. D. None of these. Answer, A. A unique verification tag. 9. In SCTP, a data chunk is numbered using blank. A. A TSN. B. An SI. C. An SSN. D. None of these. Answer, A. A TSN. 10. The bytes of data being transferred in each connection are numbered by TCP. The numbering starts with a blank. A. 0. B. 1. C. Randomly generated number. D. None of these. Answer, C. Randomly generated number. 11. In the sending computer, UDP receives a data unit from the blank layer. A. Application. B. Transport. C. IP. D. None of these. Answer, A. Application. 12. SCTP allows blank service in each association. A. Single stream. B. Multi-stream. C. Double stream. D. None of these. Answer, B. Multi-stream. 13. TCP is a blank protocol. A. Connection-oriented. B. Connectionless. C. Both A and B. D. None of these. Answer, A. Connection-oriented. 14. UDP uses blank to handle outgoing user datagrams from multiple processes on one host. A. Flow control. B. Multiplexing. C. Demultiplexing. D. None of these. Answer, B. Multiplexing. 15. Because the sending and the receiving processes may not write or read data at the same speed, TCP blank. A. Speeds up the slower process. B. Slows down the faster process. C. Uses buffers. D. None of these. Answer, C. Uses buffers. 16. SCTP association allows blank for each end. A. Only one IP address. B. Multiple IP addresses. C. Only two IP address. D. None of these. Answer, B. Multiple IP addresses. 17. UDP needs the blank address to deliver the user datagram to the correct application process. A. Port. B. Application. C. Internet. D. None of these. Answer, A. Port. 18. In an SCTP packet, control chunks come blank data chunks. A. After. B. Before. C. A or B. D. None of these. Answer, B. Before. 19. TCP is a, n, blank transport protocol. A. Unreliable. B. Best effort delivery. C. Reliable. D. None of these. Answer, C. Reliable. 20. TCP delivers blank out-of-order segments to the process. A. All. B. No. C. Some. D. None of these. Answer, B. No. 21. Multiply the header length field by blank to find the total number of bytes in the TCP header. A. 2. B. 4. C. 6. D. None of these. Answer, B. 4. 22. Which of the following does UDP guarantee? A. Flow control. B. Connection-oriented delivery. C. Either A or B. D. None of these. Answer, D. None of these. 23. TCP allows the sending process to deliver data as a blank of bytes and allows the receiving process to obtain data as a blank of bytes. A. Message, message. B. Stream, stream. C. Block, block. D. None of these. Answer, B. Stream, stream. 24. To distinguish between different data chunks belonging to the same stream, SCTP uses blank. A. TSNs. B. SYS. C. SSNs. D. None of these. Answer, C. SSNs. 25. The ports ranging from 49,152 to 65,535 can be used as temporary or private port numbers. They are called the blank ports. A. Well known. B. Registered. C. Dynamic. D. None of these. Answer, C. Dynamic. 26. UDP does not add anything to the services of IP except for providing blank communication. A. Node to node. B. Process to process. C. Host to host. D. None of these. Answer, B. Process to process. 27. The combination of an IP address and a port number is called a blank. A. Transport address. B. Network address. C. Socket address. D. None of these. Answer, C. Socket address. 28. The options field of the TCP header ranges from 0 to blank bytes. A. 10. B. 20. C. 40. D. None of these. Answer, C. 40. 29. A port address in UDP is blank bits long. A. 8. B. 16. C. 32. D. None of these. Answer, B. 16. 30. The FIN segment consumes blank sequence numbers if it does not carry data. A. 2. B. 3. C. No. D. None of these. Answer, D. None of these. 31. The inclusion of the checksum in the TCP segment is blank. A. Optional. B. Mandatory. C. At the discretion of the application program. D. None of these. Answer, B. Mandatory. 32. The SYN and ACK segment consumes blank sequence number, S, if it does not carry data. A. 2. B. 3. C. 1. D. None of these. Answer, C. 1. 33. TCP uses blank to check the safe and sound arrival of data. A. An acknowledgment mechanism. B. Out-of-band signaling. C. The services of another protocol. D. None of these. Answer, A. An acknowledgment mechanism. 34. ACK segments consume blank sequence number, S, and blank acknowledged. A. No, are not. B. 1, are not. C. No, are. D. None of these. Answer, A. No, are not. 35. In SCTP, acknowledgement numbers are used to acknowledge blank. A. Both data chunks and control chunks. B. Only control chunks. C. Only data chunks. D. None of these. Answer, C. Only data chunks. 36. The source port address on the UDP user datagram header defines blank. A. The sending computer. B. The receiving computer. C. The process running on the sending computer. D. None of these. Answer, C. The process running on the sending computer. 37. Blank control regulates the amount of data a source can send before receiving an acknowledgement from the destination. A. Error. B. Flow. C. Congestion. D. None of these. Answer, B. Flow. 38. To use the services of UDP, we need blank socket addresses. A. 4. B. 2. C. 3. D. None of these. Answer, B. 2. 39. The value of the window size is determined by blank. A. The sender. B. The receiver. C. Both the sender and receiver. D. None of these. Answer, B. The receiver. 40. TCP assigns a sequence number to each segment that is being sent. The sequence number for each segment is the number of the blank byte carried in that segment. A. First. B. Last. C. Middle. D. None of these. Answer, A. First. 41. An SCTP packet can carry blank. A. Only one data chunk. B. Several data chunks. C. No data chunks. D. None of these. Answer, B. Several data chunks. 42. UDP is an acronym for blank. A. User Delivery Protocol. B. User Datagram Procedure. C. User Datagram Protocol. D. None of these. Answer, C. User Datagram Protocol. 43. A SYN and ACK segment cannot carry data, it consumes blank sequence number, S. A. No. B. 3. C. 2. D. None of these. Answer, D. None of these. 44. TCP groups a number of bytes together into a packet called a blank. A. User datagram. B. Segment. C. Datagram. D. None of these. Answer, B. Segment. 45. There is no need for a header length field in SCTP because blank. A. There are no options in the general header. B. The size of the header is fixed. C. Both A and B. D. None of these. Answer, C. Both A and B. 46. Connection establishment in TCP is called blank handshaking. A. Two-way. B. Four-way. C. One-way. D. none of these. Answer, D, none of these. 47, UDP packets are encapsulated in blank. A, an Ethernet frame. B, an TCP segment. C, an IP datagram. D, none of these. Answer, C, an IP datagram. 48, the checksum in SCTP is blank bits. A, 16. B, 32. C, 64. D, none of these. Answer, B, 32. 49, TCP sliding windows are blank oriented. A, packet. B, segment. C, byte. D, none of these. Answer, C, byte. 50, if a segment carries data along with an acknowledgment, this is called blank. A, backpacking. B, piggybacking. C, piggybacking. D, none of these. Answer, B, piggybacking. 51, if the ACK value is 200, then byte blank has been received successfully. A, 199. B, 200. C, 201. D, none of these. Answer, A, 199. 52, a TCP segment is encapsulated in blank. A, an IP datagram. B, an Ethernet frame. C, a UDP user datagram. D, none of these. Answer, A, an IP datagram. 53, TCP is a blank protocol. A, stream-oriented. B, message-oriented. C, block-oriented. D, none of these. Answer, A, stream-oriented. 54, UDP packets are called blank. A, user datagrams. B, segments. C, frames. D, none of these. Answer, A, user datagrams. 55, in the sending computer, UDP sends a data unit to the blank layer. A, application. B, transport. C, IP. D, none of these. Answer, C, IP. 56, in SCTP, control information and data information are carried in blank chunks. A, the same chunk. B, different chunks. C, either A or B. D, none of these. Answer, B, different chunks. 57, TCP has blank, SCTP has blank. A, packets, segments. B, segments, packets. C, segments, frames. D, none of these. Answer, B, segments, packets. 58, one of the responsibilities of the transport layer protocol is to create a blank communication. A, host to host. B, process to process. C, node to node. D, none of these. Answer, B, process to process. 59, the control information in SCTP is included in the blank. A, header control field. B, control chunks. C, data chunks. D, none of these. Answer, B, control chunks. 60, communication in TCP is blank. A, simplex. B, half duplex. C, full duplex. D, none of these. Answer, C, full duplex. 61, Stream Control Transmission Protocol, SCTP, is a new blank protocol. A, reliable, character-oriented. B, reliable, message-oriented. C, unreliable, message-oriented. D, none of these. Answer, B, reliable, message-oriented. 62, to distinguish between different streams, SCTP uses blank. A. A TSN. B. An SI. C. An SSN. D. None of these. Answer, B. An SI. 63. Which of the following functions does UDP perform? A. Process-to-process communication. B. Host-to-host communication. C. End-to-end reliable data delivery. D. None of these. Answer, A. Process-to-process communication. 64. IP is responsible for blank communication while TCP is responsible for blank communication. A. Host-to-host, process-to-process. B. Process-to-process, host-to-host. C. Process-to-process, network-to-network. D. None of these. Answer, A. Host-to-host, process-to-process. 65. The connection establishment procedure in TCP is susceptible to a serious security problem called the blank attack. A. ACK flooding. B. FIN flooding. C. SYN flooding. D. None of these. Answer, C. SYN flooding. 66. UDP is called a blank transport protocol. A. Connectionless, reliable. B. Connection-oriented, unreliable. C. Connectionless, unreliable. D. None of these. Answer, C. Connectionless, unreliable. 67. In SCTP, blank can be carried in a packet that carries an init chunk. A. Only data chunks. B. Only control chunks. C. No other chunk. D. None of these. Answer, C. No other chunk. 68. UDP packets have a fixed size header of blank bytes. A. 16. B. 8. C. 40. D. None of these. Answer, B. 8. 69. The SYN flooding attack belongs to a group of security attacks known as a blank attack. A. Denial of service. B. Replay. C. Man in the middle. D. None of these. Answer, A. Denial of service. 70. When the IP layer of a receiving host receives a datagram, blank. A. Delivery is complete. B. A transport layer protocol takes over. C. A header is added. D. None of these. Answer, B. A transport layer protocol takes over. 71. The value of the acknowledgment field in a segment defines the number of the blank byte a party expects to receive. A. First. B. Last. C. Next. D. None of these. Answer, C. Next. 72. A SYN segment cannot carry data, it consumes blank sequence number, S. A. No. B. 1. C. 2. D. None of these. Answer, B. 1. 73. The acknowledgement number is blank. A. Independent. B. Randomly generated. C. Cumulative. D. None of these. Answer, C. Cumulative. 74. The local host and the remote host are defined using IP addresses. To define the processes, we need second identifiers called blank. A. UDP addresses. B. Transport addresses. C. Port addresses. D. None of these. Answer, C. Port addresses. 75. Although there are several ways to achieve process-to-process communication, the most common is through the blank paradigm. A. Client-server. B. Client-client. C. Server-server. D. None of these. Answer, A. Client-server. 76. A. N. Blank machine is a machine that goes through a limited number of states. A. Infinite state. B. Finite state. C. Both A and B. D. None of these. Answer, B, finite state. 77, UDP uses blank to handle incoming user datagrams that go to different processes on the same host. A, flow control. B, multiplexing. C, demultiplexing. D, none of these. Answer, C, demultiplexing.